I'm Herman Faust, and this is Enjoy It While It Lasts. Today I'm going to be doing a book club episode. Don't worry if you didn't read the book. A lot of people at book clubs have not read the book. I'm going to tell you the story and weigh in on why it instantly became one of my favorite books that I've ever read. Today, we are going to be talking about The Invisible Life of Addie Larue by V.E. Schwab. Addie Larue was 23 years old when she makes a deal with the darkness that turns her immortal, but also makes her unable to leave a mark on the world, including being remembered by anybody. Before I tell you the story of this book, I want to take a second to mention what Schwab does such a great job of in her writing that I will not be able to fully translate here. Her characters all felt real, whether it be the main character, a side character, or a very small role, a character that might appear in just one scene. Every person in this book behaves in a way that you would experience if you were interacting with that type of person in the real world. That is especially impressive when you consider that the setting changes countries several times and spans several centuries. She also captures exactly what it is like, and she does this with more than one person in the book, to have your life passing by you completely and then to feel like you are too far behind to be able to catch up. My absolute favorite thing about the way the book is written, though, is the way Schwab talks about time passing and our experience of it. The way it can feel too fast, how life can run away from you. Blink and a year is gone is a line from the book that I held on to. She also captures how monotonous things feel if you're only ever allowed a present in time and never allowed a future or a past. Another way that the book works that I can't capture here is how we go back and forth through the centuries to see different parts of Addie's life. I'm not going to go straight chronological through her story. I'm going to try to capture that feel by going back and forth a little bit. But I won't be going back and forth in the timeline near as much as she does in the book. And I just want to say about that at no point does it ever become confusing. She does so seamlessly. Now, let's go ahead and start with the first part of Addie's life, which is back before she made her deal with the dark. Addie Larue was a young woman born in a small town in France in the late 1600s. The most important person in Addie's life was probably a woman named Estelle. Estelle was an unmarried middle-aged woman whom Addie was inspired by. She dreamed to grow to live as free as Estelle was by not having a husband forced on her, as well as Estelle's freedom in her beliefs. Estelle would talk to her of what she called the old gods. She taught her how to pray to them, how to sacrifice something, and warned her about being careful with her words as well. As Addie wasn't sure whether or not she believed in the old god's existence or not, but she did seem to believe it more than she did in Christianity, which is what her mother was trying to teach her. Addie's father was a wood carver, and she loved to be in his shop with him and to watch him work. He talks to her, tells her stories, and encourages her to draw, including teaching her how to draw with charcoal and how to write her name as well. We get to experience the first time he lets her go with him to what is considered the big city where he goes to sell his wares. This was a transformative experience for Addie, as she didn't realize that the world was so big. Her father gives her a wooden ring during this trip that becomes her favorite piece, which she wears on a necklace. As she got a little bit older, she was devastated that when she turned 12, Addie's mother says that she's too old to act childish and waste time anymore, and that includes the fact that she's not allowed to go to town anymore. Addie tried sacrificing her best charcoal to pray that her father would take her with him the next time, but she is never able to go with him again. This might have been one of the biggest heartbreak moments for me. Partly because I can't help but imagine my own relationship with my daughters and how it would feel for them to be left behind when they just want to experience more of the world. It was the inevitability of being faced with the reality of how limited she was simply by being born a girl. As Addie got older, she has avoided courtship. That's how she puts it, avoided it. She has had to pray at different times to avoid being courted. She also has devoted more time to her artworks, filling up journal after journal with her drawings. A lot of them are of a person that she has created and refers to as her stranger. She wants so badly to be her own person the way that she sees Estelle, but she fears that one day she's going to have to stop being a dreamer and face a reality where she will be forced into a marriage and life that she does not want. Sure enough, when she's 23, her worst fear is going to be realized. Despite having successfully dodged a courtship, she is told by her parents that she will marry a widower and help raise his children. This is what the town needs of her. She spends the next stretch of time praying as much as she can for a way out, including the death of her betrothed, despite feeling guilty about that. This continues to the day of her wedding. When the time comes, she makes a run into the woods, and having sacrificed everything else, she buries the wooden ring into the ground, closes her eyes, and keeps praying as she hears church bells and her name being screamed coming from the town. Then she notices the sound has stopped, and when she opens her eyes, it's night. A man forms out of the shadows, and she realizes he looks exactly like her stranger. He refers to himself as the darkness and asks her what she wants. Addie has trouble deciding, has trouble being able to put into words what she wants, and is only able to say what she doesn't want at first. She doesn't want to be married. She doesn't want to be trapped. Eventually, she lands on saying that she wants to be free. When the darkness is trying to get her to decide on a length of time, she gets him to agree to a deal that he can have her soul when she is through with her life. She later realizes that this wording incentivizes the darkness to make her life difficult so that she will give in quickly. He agrees to the deal, which they seal with a kiss. When Addie gets back to town, she quickly learns that she has been cursed. She goes to her home, and Addie is met by her mother and father that do not recognize her. They think Addie is a crazy person, and there's an extremely heartbreaking moment where she is trying to get through to her father before he puts her outside and closes the door. Not knowing what else to do, Addie runs to Estelle. At first, Estelle thinks she's a spirit after trying to figure out who she is, to which Estelle ends up closing the door on her. Addie ends up being so distraught over that she sits down on the porch and begins openly crying. A few moments later, Estelle opens her door again, and their interaction started all over anew. This lets us see that not only will Addie not be remembered from before the deal, that people will forget her just moments after interacting with her. This time, Addie claims to be a stranger that just has nowhere to go. After hearing her out, Estelle tells her to wait a moment, that she'll be right back and she goes inside to bring her something. But again, forgets her when closing the door. Addie slinks away, realizing that if Estelle does come back, it won't be with anything to help her. It'll just be another reset of her not knowing who she is again. While out in the woods the next day, she has a similar interaction with her lifelong friend. The friend took Addie in and gave her some food, and there was a moment when she handed Addie her baby so that she can go to the other room. But when she came back, she thought Addie was an intruder that was trying to steal her baby, and Addie had to flee again. During these interactions, she also realized that she cannot say her own name. When she tried to explain what happened to her to Estelle's eyes glossed over, and she wasn't able to hear any of it. The darkness has basically erased her from the world, her story, her name, taking away from her the ability to be known in any way. She goes to the town that her father took her to as a child, where she sneaks into a stable and ends up trying to steal some bags from the side of a horse before she gets caught by a couple of stable hands. They threaten to cut her hand off, and in the struggle, she is stabbed in the shoulder, but she's also able to stab one of the men in the leg to get away. As they start to run after her, once she's able to get a little bit out of sight, they forget her and why they were running. Then we see that both stab wounds have healed, her own and the one she gave to the other man, because her body can't be damaged permanently, and she also can't leave a mark in the world, including hurting somebody else. She decides that she is going to go to Paris at this point. She also makes another important decision for herself internally, that even though she cannot speak her name to other people, it got stuck in her throat when she tried to say it to her family or to her friend or to Estelle, that while she thinks about herself, she's not going to call herself Adeline anymore. She's only going to refer to herself as Addie Larue. She's defiantly trying to take some ownership over her identity, even and as she's in the process of realizing that she's losing her identity completely. Before I continue further down the timeline of Addie's invisible lifetime, I want to jump to what is considered the present day, set in 2014. As I said before, the book does so quite a bit, jumping back and forth between Addie's past and the different parts of her past and the present, and does so extremely smoothly. In the present, she lives in New York, and the story of her current day starts with us witnessing a morning after with a lover. She was able to spend the night with him and stay close enough to where she remained in his head the whole night. However, she knows that sleep will have erased his memory, as it always does. He is a musician, and we learn that she has been helping inspire him to write a song. She has come up with a melody that he thinks that he's dreamed, and that's what he'll later tell people whenever he's asked about the inspiration for the song. They've also come up with some lyrics that he's written down, and Addie tells us that ideas are different than memories, and that ideas can take root and run wild without anyone ever knowing who planted them. Addie moves pretty smoothly through the world now. She uses her curse to navigate the world, stealing what she needs to be comfortable: food, clothes, books. She's found different places where she can stay through various people she's met, including a television star that confessed to her to being gay, even though he was hiding it from the public. They ended up becoming friends without him ever knowing it, and she would stay at his penthouse when he was out of town filming. Life is still a struggle, though. She isn't guaranteed a place to lay her head every night, and definitely still moves through life moment by moment. But she has found a way to make it work for her. She gets to know people that will never know her. She also collects experiences, which she still loves to see new things and learn what the world has to offer. She also collects memories, which is, for her, a gift and a curse just by itself, because she can remember every day since her deal perfectly, while losing memories of her former life to the fuzz of time. One evening, she starts to go into the bar that the musician that we've met plays at, but decides that she is not up for another night, not up for another time of being forgotten. Not today, at least. She goes away from there, and first she's unable to go back to the penthouse because the actor is back in his house this time. And so she tries to go to another little place that she's found, only to find, unfortunately, that it is currently also occupied by another person that Addie has spent time with and come to love in a way. This person is a woman whom is a painter that creates portraits of the sky based on people, including one of Addie's in the past, although she doesn't remember who that painting was based on. Addie ends up deciding to leave her before being forgotten, similar to how she chose not to initiate another night with the musician. So it's clear that there are at least some times where it's becoming not worth the trouble for Addie to have these days and have these momentary relationships. Obviously, she has them, but we've seen early on that she has chosen to walk away from two different people instead of going through the motions all over again. We follow her a little bit more through New York before we eventually see her going into a bookstore that she hasn't noticed before, and that's when she meets Henry. We get introduced to Henry fairly early in the book with a couple of chapters following his life, and we see that he has a strained relationship with his family, but also that there is something weird about his life. In a meeting with his sister, Henry thinks about how she is different towards him now than before, much more positive now. We see a lot of girls and guys flirting with Henry, or if not flirting, being overly nice to him. When Addie first meets Henry, it's because she tried to walk out of the bookstore that he works at with a book, The Odyssey, which was written in Greek, by the way. She has, in her time, become fluent in several languages. This is Greek being one of them. She is surprised, though, that Henry is able to follow her out without forgetting her. She assumes that he must have just been faster than the door, or faster through the door, than she realized at first. After they talk for a little bit, he lets her keep the book, and he goes back inside. The big twist here happens when Addie tries to return the book a couple of days later. She acts like it was a gift, and that's why she doesn't have a receipt, and Henry is confused as to why she is trying to return a stolen book. Addie was in shock and denying that he knows who she is from a couple of days ago. She's saying that he's wrong, but he tells her, "I remember you." She eventually just accepts what he's saying and walks outside with her head down, ashamed and, more than that, confused. She can't help herself but to wait outside the bookstore. She keeps replaying his words in her head over and over. "I remember you. I remember you. I remember you. I remember you. I remember you." When Henry steps outside the bookstore, Addie apologizes profusely and begs him to let her buy him a cup of coffee to try to make it up to him. He looks her in the eyes, and he doesn't see whatever it is that he expects to see. He sees desperation instead, so he agrees and tells her that he'll meet her for coffee as long as she doesn't come back to the store. In order to get to the point where she could move so smoothly through New York City, Addie first had to learn some difficult lessons her first time in a big city in Paris back in the 1720s. Her body won't die, but she does feel hunger that gets worse if she doesn't eat, including getting to the point of starvation pains. She can feel her body freezing despite not getting frostbite. Even though her body will always heal, she feels every physical pain, and then that pain is burned into her memory. She tried fighting off the elements and finding shelter by paying at inns with stolen money. The problem was every time the innkeeper would forget that she had paid, and her sleep would end up being interrupted and she would be thrown out, until before long she didn't have any more money left and had not yet developed the skills to be able to steal easily. At one point, the hunger pains became too much, and she was forced to make the decision to sell her body for some money. Over the next couple of months, this ends up being something that she does several times. Although, at the same time, she did also begin to improve her ability to sneak and take what she needed at times. Shelter was still something that was very rare for her to have. At one point in the winter, She had felt completely worn down by the constant grind for little to no reward that her life had become, that she just laid down in the snow and let herself fall asleep and basically froze herself. She eventually was picked up and thrown into the back of a wagon filled with dead bodies. This was how she woke up, buried under corpses, having to climb her way to the top and out of the wagon. In climbing from the dead, two things happened. First, she lost the carving of a bird that her father had made, which she had took from her last visit at home, which this was her last connection to her previous life. The second thing that happened, and partially from the experience and partially from the first thing, was that she finally felt that she was, and I quote, truly and forcibly free. I think not only from her old life, but also from any of her previous inhibitions or expectations that were adding to her suffering. Back in the present day, when Henry is leaving the bookstore, they walk together to get some coffee. Addie only has enough money to buy him one, which annoys Henry, so he ends up buying her a drink. And we see that the barista fawns over Henry. And there's another customer that is overly apologetic after bumping into their table, which, while Addie is taken aback by, Henry seems unfazed by. Henry and Addie seem to be studying each other. She's surprised to be able to tell him that what her real name is, that she can speak it and that he can hear it. Henry asks her what she sees when she looks at him. And she tells him that she sees someone who cares and feels too much and is starving in a world full of food because he doesn't know what he wants to eat. For a moment, I thought Addie was talking to me instead of Henry because of how spot on that would have been as a description of myself. This answer also struck a nerve with Henry, and only partially due to the truth of the answer. They continue their night together and then start spending more time together frequently. Addie is thrilled by the idea of making plans and being able to follow through. As they spend more and more time together, Henry is clearly curious and fascinated by Addie, and not just because she's so mysterious about how she lives in the modern world without a cell phone or so much as an email address. She clearly makes him feel something other people don't. She eases his loneliness when no others can, despite everyone seeming to love him. For Addie's part, she is falling in love with Henry, partially because of him, who he is as a person, but mainly the overwhelming experience of someone getting to know her as she's getting to know them. The little moments that people take for granted that simply comes with being known is cherished by her. And she has an underlying anxiety about losing this, that it won't be real for some reason. One of their days spent together at a park, they were eating from a food trucks. And then just shortly after eating, Henry is called by his friend B. He realizes that he forgot and is late for a dinner party where he was supposed to bring the desserts. Addie steps up as a hero and takes him to a French pastry store, where she pretends to know the owner's daughter and speaks to him in their native French. Despite at first telling them that the shop was closed, he ends up giving Addie a bunch of pastries for free, which she then gives to Henry. He invites her to the party, and against her better judgment, she decides to try to join him. At the party, Addie meets Henry's friend group, including his best friend B. B is a graduate art student and will eventually do a research project on Addie without knowing it's about her, titled The Ghost in the Frame. We also meet his next closest friend, Robbie, who is an actor and also is Henry's former boyfriend. The evening starts off well, with Addie amused at how full Henry already was when they got there, but was still having to be polite and eat a big serving of lasagna that was set in front of him. She gets along great with B, and Robbie was kind of bitchy towards her. It came across as obviously jealous. One of the other people in the friend group went outside for a bit, and when she returned, she obviously had forgotten Addie. A little bit later, Robbie also goes upstairs, and this is Addie's cue to go ahead and leave. She doesn't want to deal with Robbie coming back, forgetting her, and it creating a big confusing scene. Henry follows her out, and they go off and have the night together. But then the next morning, they run into Robbie again as they're going out to get something to eat. And at this point, Henry gets frustrated and gets mad at Robbie because he thinks Robbie is just trying to be rude and be an ass to Addie when he acts like he has no idea who she is. Addie ends up talking to Henry and tells him that Robbie is not trying to be a jerk. He really doesn't remember her. She tells him about her curse, and he is able to actually listen to what she says, and he's able to take it in without his eyes glossing over. He kind of starts laughing, and at first she thinks that he's going to call her crazy, but he tells her instead that he believes her because he has also made a deal and is also cursed. Before we go any further in her present day, we have to go back to Addie's past. After being in Paris for a little while, Addie has learned a few tricks, including we have a scene where she gets a potential John to drug himself after paying for a room. So she has the John pay for the room so that way the innkeeper will for sure remember that somebody is there. Then once in the room, she would have the John pour himself from a glass of wine that she brought for herself that was drugged. I can't decide if I think that this part was a minor plot hole or not. Because if she drugged the wine, isn't that her leaving her mark on the wine? Or maybe it isn't the same because she can drink alcohol and drug herself. Even though the effects won't last long, she can do so. So maybe if it was like, oh, I put this sleeping medication in for me, I can drug myself, but he took it. I think it's borderline, but in the book, it's at least also presented as a borderline case, as her finding the edges of her curse. Anyway, on this particular night that we are seeing, the darkness returns to her after she has drugged the guy, or he's drugged himself, just as she was about to get comfortable and be happy of having a bed for the night. He tells her that it's been 1 year since their deal. She is obviously angry with him, and she asks him, like, why did you do this to me? And he says that it was because of her words. He has kept his promise. She is as free in the world as she could possibly be. And she has all the time that she wants. But because it's her choice when her time will end, that it's in his best interest to make her life extremely difficult. He repeats her own words back that he can have her life when she doesn't want it anymore. He tells her to give in now and that her suffering will all be over. And she considers doing it before declining out of just pure defiance more than desire to go on. Fast forward a couple of years later, and she's living, when she is leaving a tailor shop, where she hid until she was forgotten about and was able to walk out with a dress, the darkness returns, again trying to tempt her into giving up. Addie tells the darkness that she saw elephants and drank champagne and heard the bells of Notre Dame, and all because she is not stuck in her old life. She tells him to imagine all the things that she will see in the years to come. This, of course, pisses off the darkness, and he leaves her again. A few years later, on another anniversary of the deal, The darkness appears again. This time, it's as she is hiding inside of a manor that she staked out, where she knows the owners are out of town. The darkness has the house servants under his control. There's some sort of hypnosis going on, and he has them make a meal for them. In this meeting, Addie decides to give the darkness a name, and he claims the one that she imagined her stranger to have when she drew him, Luke. Addie continues complaining about her situation, and that's when Luke shows her what her life would have been if he never answered her prayer. And for the first time, Addie admits to herself even that even now, knowing what she knows, she would have made the deal. When he inevitably turns the conversation towards the idea of her quitting, she once again gets defiant. Addie tells Luke that if he would have given her a normal life, she would have found satisfaction in just a few years and grown tired, and they both would have had what they wanted. Instead, she swears that since he did this to her, she will never give her soul up to him. The following year, Addie wants to make a point, and she prepares a meal. She plans to show off a little space that she's made for herself. But this anniversary, Luke doesn't show up. And this makes Addie start to panic because she realizes how much she had depended on these visits from Luke. They were the only time that she was ever remembered, the only time that she ever gets to hear her name, even if she hates the way he calls her, my Adeline. We check back in with Addie a couple of years later. On this day, she's gathered herself a small feast and carried her bounty to the stairs of Sacré-Cœur. Sacré-Cœur. I know I'm not saying it right. The famous stairs that are big and take you to a very pretty view. Anyway, she is most excited about a small jar of honey that she has managed to get her hands on. She hasn't had honey since she was a small child, when her friend's father, who was a beekeeper, gave her some. Addie is also dressed as a man. She has learned how much easier it is to move through the world when people think that she is a man. She manages this disguise at night as long as she doesn't interact too much with anyone. As she's about to sit down on the stairs, another man that was distracted by laughing with his friends bumps into her and makes her drop her jar of honey. He is apologetic, but then becomes intrigued once he realizes that Addie is a woman. He sends his friends along and introduces himself as Remy. He offers to buy her coffee as a gesture to make up for the lost honey. And Remy takes her to a nearby cafe, and this whole time he's like playing into the secret identity that Addie is using. This is also Addie's first time trying coffee in her life, and she is a bit disappointed by the bitterness of it. Addie listens as Remy tells her all about the concept of novels and essays and who his favorite writers are, including Voltaire. Voltaire actually ends up going to the cafe they are in that night, which absolutely captivates Remy. His admiration of Voltaire and the way he describes different forms of writing and his passion for reading, this all makes Addie become curious about reading. After they share the meal that Addie was going to eat alone, they go for a long walk and eventually end up at Remy's home. That night was Addie's first experience having sex out of desire, and she tells herself that this is what it was supposed to feel like. She tries to overwrite her previous memories of when she had to sell herself with the memories of her time with Remy. After a few hours of light sleep, Addie experiences her first time having a lover wake up and not know who she is. Remy looks embarrassed about not remembering her and ended up paying her, thinking that she must have been a prostitute since he couldn't remember the previous night. This frustration hits deep with Addie. She feels like Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the hill just for it to roll back down. On her way out of Remy's home, she takes with her a book by Voltaire. And as she's leaving his apartment, Luke shows up yet again in one of her weakest moments. He threatens to never visit her again and to let her wander alone entirely for all of eternity. And at this threat, like, she almost gives in, but snaps out of it when she sees the joy that is in Luke's eyes. Instead, that seeing the joy in his eyes at the idea of her quitting, she becomes even more determined, not only to refuse him, but then she becomes determined to read. It takes her a year to read the book that she took from Remy, and another decade before reading becomes natural for her. But time is one thing that she does have. The next time Luke arrives to disrupt Addie is when she has infiltrated a high society party. She orchestrated a meeting with a bouquet owner where we see that she has tried to do this several times and learned what type of what to say to get the woman to react the way she wants her to, basically. She talks herself into being brought along for a party and talks herself into getting a dress as well. Then she sneaks back downstairs into the party once everything's going on and comes in as if she's a person that is supposed to be there. Coincidentally, she sees Remy as an older man at this party. 27 years have passed. And he's in the room speaking with Voltaire and Rousseau. As Addie is enjoying the party, Luke comes in and he gets everyone's attention and speaks to the madame of the salon and points out Addie as an uninvited guest, and more than that, points out that she is wearing one of the madame's dresses, so she must be a thief as well. Addie, of course, is able to run outside before anybody stops her. And when he meets her out there, she just defiantly tells the darkness that he hasn't won anything. She could walk right back in there, and they would have forgotten this little scene that he's made. Luke tells her that while they may forget having seen her, they may forget knowing her, the idea of being suspicious of this person has been put into their minds. About a decade later, Addie will realize that Luke taught her a valuable lesson without meaning to. She'll learn that she will also be able to influence people by giving them ideas that they will then take on as their own. As we progress through her life, Addie is constantly in a now that at some point begins to blend together in the day-to-day, even for her. Even as she lives through major changes in the history of the world, her day-to-day experience is basically constantly repeating itself and always the same. She fights for basic human comforts every instance of her life, always working with and against her curse. She finds her joys in living through the advancement of technology, in seeing as many new things as she can. Her favorite joy in life is finding the edges of her curse and trying to leave a mark on the world in the way that she can, by inspiring others. She spends endless first nights with different people throughout the centuries, drawn to various types of artists mainly. Painters, sculptors, musicians, writers, and throughout the book, we are told about these different works of art in different museums, collections, or even small, lesser famous pieces. And all of them were created with artists or by artists that were having her in mind, while never being able to remember their inspiration. Many of these works end up being part of B's project, by the way. There are several times within the centuries where Addie feels like she is teetering near the edge of madness or even crossing over it. She finds and loses love time and time again, loneliness becomes a permanent state of being. She made her way back to her home several times through the years. The first time, she was surprised to see that her mother was still alive, and that made her hopeful to see her father, but he had already passed. Addie was able to find where Estelle was buried, and she dug up a young sapling that was already growing and replanted it near where Estelle was buried. We see another visit where the tree is thriving and fully grown. In each visit, Addie notes how her house deteriorates more and more and how the town changes and grows. During these visits, she's always reminded of something that Luke told her. Even rocks are worn away by time. When she visits her hometown for the final time in 1914, the tree had been struck down, destroyed by lightning. This was especially hard on Addie. She started questioning why even bother trying to plant seeds? Why try to grow anything if everything is going to wither away and die? Her immortality is really weighing on her here. And of course, that's when Luke shows up. He reminds her that he is the only one that knows her and is trying to tempt her into giving in again. Addie is able to reply to that she's also the only one that knows him. She replies that she thinks that he enjoys her company just as much as she enjoys being remembered as well. But the difference is that it must be nice for him because he can pop in and visit whenever he wants to be remembered. Luke responds to this by giving her back the wooden ring that she buried in the dirt the first time that she called him, and tells her that she has the power to summon him. If she puts on the ring that she calls, that he will come. She understands that this represents a challenge in and of itself. Which of them will budge first? Will she call for him, or will he need her company first? I want to go back a little bit because I want to talk a little bit more about how Addie lived through history. The first time that Addie left Paris, it was not on her own volition. Luke took her away from the French Revolution as things were escalating, telling her that he abhors war because people tend to hold on to their souls more tightly and they want more unrealistic deals. He teleported Addie through the darkness into Italy, and after the initial hatred for being transported without her permission, she can't help but to be glad to be out of her war-torn home and fascinated by Italy. Over her many years, she also, as I mentioned earlier, became fluent in many languages because she lived in many countries. Eventually, when World War I was in its beginning, she fled via stowing away on a ship to New York for the first time. By World War II, she regretted having fleeing her home and returned to try to help. She used her curse to be a spy, stealing and delivering information while nobody even knew that she existed. And she was successful for a couple of years until she was captured by German soldiers. When she's thrown into a cell, she starts to panic because she is thinking about the possibility of being trapped and forgotten, all while facing whatever horrors a prisoner of war might face. So she puts the ring on. And for lack of a better way of saying it, Luke comes to the rescue. Luke and Addie's encounters went through many evolutions through the centuries. She became able to read his mood by the shade of green in his eye. At times, he would be sweet to her, help her in one small way or another, but he also showed her his true self at times, including once when he brought her along with him to collect the soul of Beethoven, which he did as an intimidation tactic to remind her of what will happen to her one day. In 1952, in LA, Luke shows up on his own again, interrupting one of Addie's dates. She insists that he keep her company for driving away the person that she was going to be spending the night with. Luke takes her to see Frank Sinatra, whom he informs her that he has a deal with. After some dances and some drinks, Luke takes Addie to a nightclub of his that's at the top of a skyscraper. This night ends with them having sex for the first time, and this starts them down a path over the next few years of having these reoccurring dates. Addie always tells herself that it's purely for the physical passion or just for the simple novelty of being known. Later in New Orleans, Luke gives Addie something that she hasn't had in over 300 years, a home. They live together for some time, and Addie is never sure if Luke is actually falling in love with her or if this is the next evolution of their eternal battle of wills. She's unsure of her own feelings too, not being able to fully hold on to the idea that Luke is the darkness, despite sneaking to witness him collect another person's soul that night. This one was different because it wasn't entirely filled with fear. This was an old woman who went into the darkness without any argument. And Addie felt like she understood that feeling of exhaustion that the woman felt and the acceptance that it led her to have. This time period ended when Addie asked a question to see if Luke was actually in love or not. She asked Luke to release her from their deal. Luke said that he could not outright release her, that he did not have the power to. But he did say that maybe terms of a deal could be changed or stretched, or maybe they could make a new deal. He said that he could give her soul back, but first she would have to submit. At the word submit, it was like the veil over her eyes dropped. She cursed him for this all just being another one of his games. Their entire time together just being another attempt at him trying to get her to give up her soul. For a moment, he looks hurt, and Addie isn't sure if she was correct about his intentions or not. But then he grins, and he strikes back verbally. And the way that this scene was written, I'm not sure though. I tend to think that Luke might have actually meant his promise in that moment, or at least he wasn't sure himself what he would have done if Addie did submit. Addie absolutely did the right thing here though, don't get me wrong. Even if in the moment he meant what he was saying, if she gave up her soul, I think the nature of the darkness would have made it at best a 50-50 chance that he followed through with his promise. He was bound by deals, yeah, but he's lied a ton of times throughout the book. This argument that they have ends with the house burning down and most of the possessions that Addie had been able to acquire over their shared years burned with it. This was the last time that Addie saw Luke before we meet her in the present day. We're about to catch back up to our present day, but before we do, I need to talk about Henry a little bit. Before Henry met Addie, he proposed to a woman that turned him down. Before that, Henry felt like a black sheep of his family. His parents were happy whenever he started down the path to be a rabbi, but he soon realized that he didn't want to go down that path, that he didn't even believe in God. His older brother was a surgeon who took on many of the same mannerisms of their father, which included being judgmental of Henry's life choices, or rather his lack of life choices. His family felt like he was letting his life go to waste by working at a bookstore and having seemingly no drive or focus. His sister who was an art critic, always made Henry feel like her real job was to be a critic of him, but they were at least semi-close. Henry felt lost in life. He was never drawn in any direction. He also could never get over the fact that any one path that you choose in your life forces you to leave behind every other one. Henry felt the years going by already beginning to accelerate way too much, putting him further behind from where he was supposed to be in life because he still hasn't even started anywhere. He liked photography, but didn't feel good enough to become a photographer. He enjoyed books, but couldn't see himself as a writer. Everyone else moving forward without him, and he could not decide, and he was starting to feel like it might be too late to pick anything because he was already so far behind. In writing this character, Henry, V.E. Schwab wrote the single most relatable character for myself that I have ever experienced in any story. I have felt everything that Henry has felt, and she describes those feelings perfectly. The storms or bouts of depressions he has, the self-doubt, the indecisiveness. Henry carries the feeling that he would never be good enough, not to succeed or to be loved. So the night when his longtime girlfriend said no, the girlfriend that finally made his parents seem to think he was doing something right, the girlfriend that made him feel like his life had a little order to it, that night that she said no, Henry broke. He went on a day-long bender, hiding away from his friends until he was walking alone in the rain with cuts on his hand that he got from smashing a bottle when he fell. He walked up to the roof, walked to the edge, wanted the storm in his head to stop, and then was about to step off when the darkness appeared. When he asked Henry what he wanted, Henry said he wanted to be enough for everyone. The darkness shakes his hand and the deal is done. From that point forward, everyone that saw Henry loved him. His parents saw the perfect son when they looked at him. His siblings saw the perfect brother. Men and women were attracted to him or saw him as a great friend. He was offered a tenured professor job by the dean of his old school because when he looked at Henry, he just saw the perfect candidate. People saw what they needed most in a person when they looked at him. So he would always be enough for everyone. It will also never be Henry, not fully, that they see when they look at him. So he will always be inevitably alone. This is what made Addie different for Henry. He had asked many people what they see when they look at him, and they always described a person that he wasn't. Addie so accurately saw him for who he was as no one else could have, even before the curse. That meant as much to Henry as it did to Addie when he said the words, "I remember you." Addie was able to push back any fears that this was some joke from Luke before he was just going to pull the rug out from under her. She embraced the thought that this was a slip through the cracks. And so she was able to accept whenever she shared the thought with Henry that she's not immune to his curse. She needed simply for a person to remember her. And that's why his curse allows him to do just that. And it also means that she can truly see who he is because the simple fact that he does remember her is enough for her. Which is why his curse breaks through hers and her curse breaks through his. Addie and Henry spend all of their time together the next month, that all that Henry can spare. She met his friends time and time again. Addie learned that if she wrote with her hand over Henry's, that the writing would stay. Henry also started writing down everything that Addie could tell him about her life. They loved each other, they made each other happy, but everything wasn't perfect. Henry still had his storms. They came and went, including the feeling of time passing by. He can't stand to feel like he is wasting even a moment with Addie. On one of their dates, they are at a theater watching an old Alfred Hitchcock movie. Henry is squirming in his seat a little bit and says that he's fine, just that the movie's a little bit slow. Addie tells him that it'll be worth it in the end, which reveals to him that she's seen it before. And this is something he didn't realize, and eventually just keeps eating Henry up so bad, and he feels so suffocated by the frustration of it that he steps outside of the theater. When Addie follows him, Henry tries to explain how it felt like it was a waste of time since she had already seen it, and how once the idea that time is being wasted pops in his head, that he can't let it go. She is understanding of this for him and takes him to go and try to find something new. They still end up doing something that is not 100% new for Addie, but it's different enough. She takes him to an underground dance club that is located in this abandoned subway station, that you get to by saying a password to a guy that is just standing on his phone, looking like he's just randomly there next to some door. This is the club that she helped inspire, actually. She showed a club manager the location one time, and in their evenings together had conversations that he took notes down that would end up one day becoming this dance club that she stumbled upon. She found it by recognizing a logo that they had come up with together, and said the proposed password to the guy, and it ended up working. It ends up driving away the storm that is in Henry's mind that night. Henry does actually give Addie new experiences as well. It's just that the new experiences that Henry gives Addie are much simpler, even though they give her a much bigger thrill. It's just whatever comes with having a person remember you. Waking up and having breakfast together, not having an awkward exchange when the person next to you wakes up like not knowing who you are. Addie also starts to love Henry just for the sweet guy that he is. She spends more and more time with his friends, even though for them it's always the first meeting. And she wonders how her and Henry can make this life together when no one in his life will know her. This is a concern for her, but it's also a sign that she's thinking about a future with Henry. She's allowing herself to think in terms of having a lifetime with him. Even though she hasn't seen Luke since New Orleans, Addie still worries that he's going to come across them, that he's going to find their stolen happiness and find a way to take it away. This anxiety especially ramps up when the anniversary of her deal comes up. She explains this to Henry, and that they can't be together that day. Just in case he comes, she won't be seen with him. She doesn't want him to know. Henry understands, but says that while the night might be his, the day is theirs. She agrees, and Henry and Addie spend the day at the beach. This probably wasn't the best choice of activity for the day if they planned on splitting up before nightfall, because spending the whole day in the sun and in the water exhausted the two. When they got to Henry's apartment, they ended up falling asleep and didn't wake up until well into the night. When she wakes up and sees it's dark, Addie fears that she's about to see Luke there with them. And when she doesn't, though, it kind of breaks her tension. She stops Henry when he tries to hurry away once he woke up. And she tells herself that Luke is not going to show up. So they decide to go out. And while out at a place for some food and a drink, it happens. Addie sees Luke. She tries to distance herself from Henry before he notices, but fails. She then tries to act like Henry is just another one of her dates that she's had through the years, but Luke scolds her. He says he knows every deal he's made and that he's around more than she realizes. He tells her not to worry, that he won't do anything. Time will take care of that for him, and that they won't have very much time left. This leads to Henry admitting the truth about his deal, that he agreed to sell his soul for only a year. When she had asked him the first time, he said it was for a lifetime. And while that didn't sound like something that she thought Luke would agree to, she wanted it to be true enough that she didn't question it deeply. Henry explained that in the moment that he made the deal, he would have agreed to sell his soul for even a moment of feeling at peace. He didn't tell her the truth because he wanted them to be able to enjoy the time that they did have, to not have the dark cloud of the end of his life hanging over them constantly. Addie wants to try to make another deal or figure a way out, but Henry wants her to not waste the remaining couple of months that they do have, and to instead just continue to spend their days together the way they've been doing. Luke told Addie that he would consider talking about changing Henry's deal if she would go out on a date with him, since they didn't get their customary anniversary date. Despite Henry's pleading, she decides to go along with Luke to try to save Henry. The date is more of a chess match of words between the two, with Addie trying to appease Luke just enough to get him to be willing to talk about Henry. Luke tells Addie that he knew he would never get her to give up her soul after that very first year in Paris when she described seeing elephants for the first time. He says that he would let Henry out of his deal if Addie agreed to be with him again to spend eternity together. When she refuses, he transports her through the darkness again, dropping her off in the middle of Central Park, but several days have passed since she first left. Addie runs back to Henry and promises to do exactly as he had asked originally, and to stay with him for the rest of his time. And they do just that, pushing the panic aside to enjoy the little bit of time they have left, despite it becoming increasingly difficult. As the time winds down, Addie promises to stay with Henry until the very moment of the end. He writes down everything of her life up to and including their meeting. He wants to be able to leave these writings to her at least. This is a really difficult time emotionally as a reader here, because you can really feel both characters' very different types of pain so well. Henry is feeling time pass him by, and it's only getting worse and worse. Addie is living with the dread of the inevitability that she will lose the only person that's been able to remember her. She will lose not only another person that she loves, but that she will be all alone again. When the day finally comes, Henry wants to stay in bed as long as possible, to freeze time in a way. He hopes that eternity will feel like that, just a frozen moment. Addie helps Henry distract from his restless energy. She comforts him throughout the day, and then when the time is approaching, they go up to the roof where he made his deal. Addie tells Henry that he's got to promise her something, that he must never forget her, and tells him that he needs to finish writing her story. Henry is obviously confused by this, and he tells her that he's written everything she's told him, that the stories are in the journals, and then she says that she hasn't told him how the story ends yet. Because a few nights prior to Henry's final day, Addie had slipped out of bed in the middle of night without waking him up. She went out and put on the ring, summoning Luke. She tells him that she'll make a deal with him, but this time she's more careful in her wording. Once again, she uses a lesson that she learned from Luke against him here. She agrees that if Luke lets Henry out of his deal when his time is up, and if his memories of her remain intact, that Addie will be with Luke as long as he wants her. She tells this to Henry on the rooftop on what was supposed to be his final night alive. This is the last time Henry sees Addie before she disappears into the darkness with the darkness, and Henry is left behind, alive, and with his memories of her remaining. At the end of the book, we see that a few months have passed. Henry's memories of Addie are there, but they're already fading in the way that memories do naturally. He has turned the journals of her story into a manuscript, which B has just finished reading. He ends his story on the rooftop. He knows that it's not the true end of Addie's story, but it's the end of what he knows, and he doesn't want to add his own imagined ending to the book. He wants the book to be purely Addie's story. Henry promises B that he's going to send the book off to get it published. B also has finally gotten her project approved for her dissertation, The Ghost in the Frame, that I referred to earlier. And she believes that that is the inspiration for Henry's novel. He doesn't try to convince her of the reality of the story, but B does add some of the photographs that he took trying to take pictures of Addie to her project. In the pictures, Addie, her face always comes out blurry or wrong in some way. The only clear part of her body that is seen is the picture where they pointed the camera directly to the ground and you can see her feet. Writing the book also gave Henry a sense of purpose, and he starts to feel like he has direction in his life, at least a little. He doesn't seem weighed down by trying to be enough for everyone and is trying to simply be enough for himself. Henry tries selling to publishers under the condition that his name not appear on the cover of the book, that the only name on the cover is Addie Larue. When it does get bought by a publishing company, the money is enough for him to be able to take some time and figure out his next move. But for the first time in his life, this does not feel overwhelming to him. The book ends with us seeing Addie one more time, a short time later in a bookstore in London. She overhears people talking about their love of this new book and eventually sees a new section on a wall that is reserved for new releases that are selling fast. An entire section of the wall with the title showing The Invisible Life of Addie Larue gives Addie one of the purest moments of joy that she has had in her entire 300 plus years of living. Luke enters the store behind her and is amused at how cleverly she has been able to share her story and leave her mark on the world. We are left with Addie's final thoughts in this story. She's thinking about how Luke believes that he's won, that she is his, but she still plans on earning her full freedom from him. She doesn't believe that Luke is capable of true love, that he only understands power and submission. She intends to push Luke into that realization about himself over time. She chose the wording of her deal because she intends to make him not want her anymore. Addie isn't entirely sure of how she's going to pull that off, but she has plenty of time to figure it out. As I said at the start, this book has become one of my favorites. the way human emotion comes across in terms of need and longing and very personal truths that are universal to everyone. We all want to leave something behind. We all want to be remembered. There is a problem with the plot that nags me a little bit more even the second time reading it than it did the first time. Addie is able to spend time with people for as long as they aren't separated. But there's no way that she forced herself along for every restroom break her companions would need to have throughout the days and evenings together. We've seen it only takes a closed door or a moment for the curse to erase her from people's minds. So really, she shouldn't have been able to have any of the connections that she did. I tried thinking for an excuse around it or find a way to fix it, and I couldn't come up with anything. And I'm guessing Schwab couldn't either, and that's why she just kind of ignored it and hoped the readers wouldn't mind, because the moments of intimacy in the pockets of memory before forgetting were so extremely essential to the story. This is the type of thing that not everyone cares about, but it does bug me. It's an itch in my brain that I can't scratch. The fact that this story does work so well emotionally, though, gives it goes a long way to making this forgivable in my suspension of disbelief. But I did just have to point it out, or else I would have gone crazy internally. I especially, though, love the way that Henry and Addie had extremely different amounts of time, yet they both had points where time felt like an enemy. The constant nows for Addie, the constant coming of the future for Henry. Addie's test was to endure because she had too much time, at times almost, but she never had enough time that mattered. She never had enough time with the people that she truly needed, and that started even before the curse, all the way back to the time where her time was being cut short of being with her father because her mother didn't want her going into town anymore. She didn't get time to live like Estelle like she wanted. And she didn't, once the curse took place, she didn't get enough time with Remy or any of her lovers that she took throughout the years, just one night at a time. Time also became meaningless and cruel simultaneously for her. I already mentioned how much I felt like Henry when it comes to time passing us by and coming and going of storms and never feeling like I could be enough for anyone, including not being enough for myself. Addie brought Henry a second chance to himself. While there's never truly an ending to someone's story until they die, Henry's finding a measure of peace, a slight sense of direction, was a very feel-good ending for me, for him to have. And in this story, it was a way for it to be a very feel-good ending without feeling fake. It would have been forced if Henry was then able to have his whole life mapped out, or he felt like he now had strong direction of what he wanted to do. But it hit home harder because he wasn't sure what he was going to do next, but that he was still okay with that. I know this next point happens to some readers because I discussed this book in a book club before, that some of the readers felt this way. And I think that some readers are pulled in by Luke in the middle of the story. I think this book does a great job walking the line and almost presenting Luke in a similar way that other fantasy romance novels do. He almost comes across as dark, brooding, handsome, and just in need of a little bit of love to be able to let his good side out. However, I think any readers that do get pulled into this trap forget that any kindness that he ever shows Addie is entirely manipulative. He created a hostage situation which was perfect to make it likely for her to grow emotions for him, because he forcibly made himself her only pillar for normal interaction. He never stops being a monster in my eyes, and I felt anxious in the parts where it seemed that Addie might be forgetting that, and where she was coming close to falling for him. This also does a great job showing how abusers are able to gain mental control over their victims in real life via a mixture of charisma and love bombing. He made into reality what a lot of abusers only try to project into their victims. He made it that no one will love you except for me. I was so proud of Addie for always being wary of that fact, though, even as she felt herself developing feelings for Luke, especially when she was able to break his spell over her entirely by asking for her freedom. In the end, she could have decided to simply go along with him, to save Henry, have her story be out in the world, and then to try to find the happiness that she tried to have before in New Orleans. Instead, she sees Luke for what he is and understands how to wield the power that she does have. If I had to guess at the end of Addie's story, I would say that she will succeed in hurting Luke in a way to where he does not want her anymore. She will eventually find freedom, maybe even being released into mortality again. Remember, whether you have a year left or made a deal with the darkness and have centuries, you only have one life to live. You might as well enjoy it while it lasts.